The sound of my own front door closing woke me at 2 in the morning. I lay perfectly still in my bed, listening. Footsteps in the hallway. Quiet, careful, someone trying not to be heard. My hand moved slowly to the nightstand drawer where I kept my service weapon, retired but still licensed. 30 years as a police officer had taught me that when someone enters your home uninvited at 2 a.m., you prepare for the worst. The footsteps stopped outside my bedroom door. A pause. Then the door creaked open, just a crack. Light from the hallway spilled across my floor. I kept my breathing steady, eyes barely open, watching through my lashes. A figure stood in the doorway, tall, male. My heart was pounding, but my hand remained steady on the grip of my gun. Then I heard the voice. He's asleep. Didn't even lock his bedroom door. Dad's getting worse, Sarah. We can't wait much longer. David, my son. Standing in my doorway at 2 in the morning, talking about me like I was already gone. A woman's voice responded from the hallway. Sarah, my daughter-in-law. Did you find the deed? Not yet. He's hidden it somewhere. But it doesn't matter. Once we get him declared incompetent, we'll have access to everything. The lawyer said it's straightforward at his age. I remained motionless, barely breathing, as my own son discussed stealing my home while I slept 10 feet away. The door closed softly. Their footsteps retreated down the hall. I heard drawers opening in my study, papers rustling. They were searching my house for what? For proof of ownership? For bank statements? For ammunition to use against me? I released my grip on the gun and stared at the ceiling, my mind racing through everything I'd noticed over the past 6 months. The little comments, the concerned looks, the suggestions that I was forgetting things, the insistence that I needed help. I'd thought they cared. I'd thought they were worried about their aging father. I'd been wrong. My name is Thomas Brennan. I'm 65 years old, and until 6 months ago, I believed my son loved me. I spent 28 years as a police officer, the last 12 as chief of police for a mid-sized city. I've investigated hundreds of crimes. I've interrogated murderers, con artists, thieves. I've seen every manipulation tactic, every deception, every betrayal humans are capable of. But I never thought I'd need to investigate my own family. My wife, Catherine, died 4 years ago from pancreatic cancer. It happened fast, brutally fast, 6 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. David was supportive during that time, calling every day, helping with arrangements, sitting with me during those first terrible months of grief. He was my only child, and losing his mother had brought us closer than we'd been in years. Or so I thought. After Catherine died, I threw myself into work for another year before retiring at 61. My pension was solid, $30,000 a year, and I'd been smart with investments over the decades. Between my retirement accounts and Catherine's life insurance, I had about $420,000 in liquid assets. But my real wealth was the house. Catherine and I had bought it 37 years ago for $85,000. It was a fixer-upper in what was then a declining neighborhood. We'd spent years renovating it ourselves, weekends and evenings, turning it into our dream home. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a workshop in the garage, a garden that Catherine had loved. Over the decades, the neighborhood had transformed. Young professionals moved in, property values skyrocketed. The house was now worth $850,000, maybe more. It was my home, my memories. Every room held pieces of Catherine, of our life together, of the family we'd built. I'd planned to live here until I died, then leave it to David in my will. That was always the plan. David knew this. We'd discussed it many times over the years. "Don't worry about me, Dad," he'd always said. "Keep the house as long as you need it. I'm doing fine." He was doing fine. David worked in pharmaceutical sales, making decent money. He and Sarah had been married 6 years. No kids yet, though they'd been talking about starting a family. They owned a townhouse about 40 minutes away. Nothing fancy, but respectable. I'd helped them with the down payment 5 years ago, a gift of $30,000 because I wanted to see my son settled and happy. The first sign something was wrong came about 8 months ago. David and Sarah started visiting more often, every weekend, sometimes twice a week. At first, I was pleased. I'd been lonely since Catherine died. Having family around felt good. But their visits had a pattern I started to notice. They'd arrive with concern on their faces. They'd ask how I was feeling, if I was remembering to take my medication, if I was eating properly. Sarah would inspect the kitchen, checking expiration dates on food, clucking her tongue at dishes in the sink. David would walk through the house, pointing out maintenance issues: a loose handrail, a burned-out light bulb, weeds in the garden. "Dad, you need to stay on top of these things," David would say. "What if you fell on those stairs? What if you tripped over those weeds?" I'd brush it off, tell him I was fine, tell him I'd handle it, but the comments kept coming, week after week, each visit another catalog of my supposed failings. 3 months ago, the suggestion started. "Dad, have you thought about downsizing? This house is too big for one person." "Dad, what about a retirement community? You'd have people around, activities, support staff." "Dad, managing a property this size at your age is a lot of responsibility." I told them I wasn't interested. I loved my house. I was perfectly capable of maintaining it. I was 65, not 90. I was healthy, active, sharp. But they persisted, gentle at first, then more insistent. 2 months ago, Sarah started talking about memory issues. "Thomas, you told us that story last week. Don't you remember?" I did remember, but she was so certain that I started doubting myself. "You forgot we were coming today, didn't you? We called yesterday to confirm." I hadn't forgotten. I'd been working in the garage and hadn't heard the phone, but her tone suggested I was lying. David joined in. "Dad, you left the stove on last time we visited. Sarah had to turn it off. That's dangerous. I hadn't left the stove on. I was certain of it. But they were both so adamant, so concerned, that I started questioning my own memory. That's when I realized what they were doing. Gaslighting. A manipulation tactic I'd seen countless times in domestic abuse cases. Make the victim doubt their own perception of reality. Plant seeds of confusion. Create a narrative of incompetence. It's insidious because it works slowly, eroding confidence over time. I started paying closer attention. I kept notes of our conversations, wrote down what was said when they visited, what they claimed I'd forgotten. Patterns emerged. Stories I supposedly repeated that I'd never told. Appointments I'd allegedly missed that had never been scheduled. Dangers I'd supposedly created that never happened. They were building a case. But for what? I got my answer 6 weeks ago when I found the brochures. I'd been taking out the trash when I noticed them in the recycling bin, partially hidden under newspapers. Glossy brochures for nursing homes and assisted living facilities. Not the nice kind either. The budget kind. The kind with shared rooms and institutional food and activities that consist of bingo in a fluorescent-lit common area. Someone had been researching these places. Someone had requested information packets, and they'd thrown them away in my house, which meant they'd brought them here, looked through them, and discarded them where they thought I wouldn't see. I pulled them out and brought them inside. Highland Manor Senior Living, Oak Ridge Assisted Care, Meadowbrook Memory Support. That last one made my blood run cold. Memory support. That was code for dementia care, for people who couldn't function independently, for people who needed to be locked in for their own safety. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at those brochures, understanding flooding through me. They weren't just concerned about me living alone. They were planning to put me in a facility. They were laying groundwork to have me declared incompetent so they could take control of my care, my finances, my property. They were trying to steal my house. I thought about calling David, confronting him directly. But 3 decades of police work had taught me better. Never reveal what you know until you have enough evidence to act. Never let a suspect know they're being investigated. Never give them a chance to destroy evidence or construct a defense. If my son and daughter-in-law were planning what I suspected, I needed proof. Hard proof. The kind that would hold up in court if necessary, because that's where this was heading. I could feel it. I went to my study and pulled out the deed to my house from my file cabinet. It was safe, properly recorded. But I took it to my bank the next day and put it in a safety deposit box. Then I called my attorney, Margaret Holloway, a sharp woman I'd worked with during my police chief days. "Margaret, I need to update my estate plan," I told her. "Specifically, I need to protect my house." "From what, Thomas?" "From my son." There was a pause on the line. "Tell me what's happening." I told her everything. The visits, the gaslighting, the brochures, my suspicions about incompetency proceedings and guardianship. Margaret listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Thomas, what you're describing is elder abuse, financial exploitation. If your son is trying to manipulate you into giving up your home or having you declared incompetent when you're clearly of sound mind, that's illegal. It's also, unfortunately, becoming increasingly common. What are my options? First, we protect your assets immediately. I recommend putting your house in a revocable living trust with you as the trustee. That way, you maintain complete control, but the property isn't in your name personally. If someone tries to initiate guardianship proceedings, the house is protected. They can't touch it. Do it, I said. Within a week, my house was in the Thomas Brennan Revocable Living Trust. My name was no longer on the deed. If David searched public records, he'd find nothing. The property wasn't mine anymore on paper, which meant he couldn't claim it even if he somehow got guardianship of me personally. But I needed more than defensive measures. I needed to know exactly what they were planning. I needed evidence. I called another old colleague, Frank Mendez, who'd worked with me in investigations for 15 years before retiring to start a private security company. Frank, I need equipment, cameras, audio recording devices, small, invisible, professional grade. Who are you surveilling, Tommy? My son. Frank didn't ask questions. 2 days later, he came to my house with a box of equipment. Tiny cameras that looked like smoke detectors, audio recording devices the size of a shirt button, a digital recorder that could run for 72 hours on a single charge. These are legal for you to use in your own home, Frank said, setting them up. Anything recorded here is admissible if you need it in court. I'm putting cameras in your living room, kitchen, and hallway. Audio devices in your study and dining room. Everything feeds to this hard drive in your bedroom closet. You can review footage on your laptop anytime. Thank you, Frank. Tommy, whatever's happening, I'm sorry. But I'm glad you're handling it the right way. Evidence first, emotion later. That's good police work. After Frank left, I sat in my bedroom and tested the system. Crystal clear video, perfect audio. If David and Sarah discussed their plans in my house, I'd have every word recorded. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, David and Sarah came for their regular Sunday visit. I greeted them warmly, played the role they expected. The aging father, grateful for attention, slightly confused, needing guidance. We had lunch. They asked their usual questions about my health, my memory, my ability to manage the house. I gave vague answers, let them interpret weakness where there was none. After lunch, I excused myself to use the bathroom. I took my time, giving them privacy. When I came back, they were sitting on the couch, speaking in low voices. I paused in the hallway, out of sight, listening. He's definitely declining, Sarah was saying. Did you see how he struggled to remember what day it was? I hadn't struggled. I'd known exactly what day it was, but I'd hesitated deliberately, testing them. They'd taken the bait. The doctor appointment next week is crucial, David said. If we can get Dr. Patterson to document cognitive decline, that's the medical evidence we need for the petition. Petition. There it was. They were planning to file a petition for guardianship. They were going to try to have me declared legally incompetent. What if your dad refuses to go? Sarah asked. He won't refuse. He trusts Dr. Patterson. He's been seeing him for 20 years, and Patterson owes me a favor after I got him into that clinical trial last year. My stomach turned. Dr. Patterson, my family physician, David had gotten him into a clinical trial. Was my own doctor compromised? Would he falsify medical records to help my son steal my property? I couldn't know for sure, but I couldn't take the chance either. The next morning, I called Dr. Patterson's office and requested all my medical records be sent to me. It was my legal right. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived. I read through everything carefully. My records were clean. No documentation of memory issues, cognitive decline, or any condition that would suggest I was incompetent. My last physical 4 months ago had been excellent. Blood pressure normal, cholesterol under control, cognitive function tests all passed easily. If Dr. Patterson was going to help David, he'd have to falsify records, and if he did, I'd have proof. The doctor appointment was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. David had made it without asking me, had simply called to inform me he'd be picking me up at 1:30. I agreed pleasantly, played the compliant father. I arrived at Dr. Patterson's office with my phone in my pocket, voice recorder activated. The appointment was brief. Dr. Patterson asked routine questions. I answered them correctly, sharply, giving him no ammunition. He seemed confused, kept glancing at his computer screen like he was expecting to see something that wasn't there. "Thomas, you're doing very well," he said finally. "Blood pressure good. Reflexes good. Your health is excellent for a man your age." "What about his memory?" David interjected. He'd insisted on coming into the examination room with me, claiming he needed to discuss concerns with the doctor. "He's been forgetting things, repeating stories, getting confused about days." Dr. Patterson looked uncomfortable. "I haven't observed any memory issues today." Thomas answered all my questions appropriately. "But you should document our concerns," David pressed, "for his medical record, in case there are issues in the future." "I document what I observe," Dr. Patterson said firmly. "And what I observe is a healthy, cognitively intact 65-year-old man." I watched David's jaw tighten. His plan wasn't working. Dr. Patterson wasn't going to be his medical puppet. After the appointment, David drove me home in silence. I could feel his frustration radiating off him. When we pulled into my driveway, he didn't turn off the engine. "Dad, we need to talk about your living situation," he said abruptly. "I'm fine where I am," I replied. "No, you're not. This house is too much. Sarah and I have been looking at facilities where you'd be safer, where you'd have people around." "I don't want a facility. I want my home." "Dad, you can't always have what you want. Sometimes we have to make practical decisions. Sarah and I are prepared to help you transition. We've found a place with an opening next month." "Highland Manor. It's very nice." Highland Manor, one of the brochures I'd found in my trash. A facility with shared rooms and the smell of institutional disinfectant, a place where people went to wait for death. "I'm not going," I said firmly. "Dad, this isn't really up for discussion. You need support. We're your family. We're trying to help you." "By forcing me into a nursing home? By making sure you're safe? By making sure you don't hurt yourself? By taking responsibility that you apparently can't handle anymore?" I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, and saw a stranger. Someone capable of cruelty I never would have imagined. Someone who saw his father not as a person, but as an obstacle to wealth. "I'm not signing anything," I said. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my house, and I'm staying in it." I got out of the car and walked to my door. Behind me, I heard David's engine rev, tires squealing as he pulled away. I went inside, locked the door, and immediately went to my laptop to review the footage from the cameras. I watched David and Sarah on my couch, discussing me like I was already incompetent. I listened to them plan my institutionalization. I heard every word about the petition, the doctor, the facility. I had it all recorded, every conversation, every manipulation, every lie. But I needed more. I needed to know their endgame. Were they planning to sell the house immediately? Were they planning to keep me locked away indefinitely? What would they do if I resisted? The answer came 2 nights later. That's when I heard my front door close at 2 a.m. That's when I pretended to sleep while my son stood in my doorway, discussing my incompetence with his wife. That's when I heard them searching my study for the deed they'd never find. And that's when I understood the full scope of their betrayal. They weren't waiting for me to agree. They weren't trying to convince me. They were moving forward regardless, planning to have me declared incompetent by force if necessary, planning to institutionalize me against my will, planning to take everything I'd worked for and call it love. I lay in my bed after they left, staring at the ceiling, making calculations. I had evidence now. Recorded conversations, documented lies, proof of their intentions. But was it enough? Could I stop them before they filed their petition? And if they did file, could I prove I was competent when they'd spent months building a narrative that I wasn't? I thought about Catherine, about what she would say if she were here. She'd always been the pragmatic one, the strategist. "Tommy," she'd say, "you're a cop. You know how to build a case, so build it." She was right, I was a cop. For 28 years, I'd investigated crimes and built prosecutions. I knew how to gather evidence, how to document patterns, how to present facts that couldn't be disputed. My son thought he was dealing with a confused old man who wouldn't fight back. He was about to learn that police training doesn't expire, that age doesn't diminish intellect, that the man he was trying to destroy had spent 3 decades catching people smarter and more dangerous than him. The war had started, and I was going to win it. So far, Thomas discovered his son David and daughter-in-law Sarah were planning to have him declared incompetent to steal his $850,000 house. After finding nursing home brochures and overhearing their 2 a.m. search for his property deed, Thomas used his police training to install hidden cameras and protect his assets in a revocable trust. Now, with evidence gathering underway, the real battle is about to begin. The morning after David and Sarah's midnight break-in, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing footage on my laptop. The cameras had captured everything. David rifling through my desk drawers, Sarah checking my bedroom for documents, their whispered conversation about finding the deed, about timing the guardianship petition, about getting me into Highland Manor before I could resist. I saved the files to 3 separate encrypted drives. 1 stayed hidden in my house, 1 went to Margaret Holloway's office, 1 went into my bank safety deposit box. I'd learned long ago that evidence means nothing if it can be destroyed. Redundancy was survival. My phone rang. Margaret. "Thomas, I've been doing research on guardianship proceedings in our state," she said without preamble. "If David files a petition claiming you're incapacitated, there will be a hearing. You'll have the right to be present, to be represented by counsel, and to present evidence of your competency. But here's what concerns me. The burden of proof in these cases is surprisingly low. If David can present medical testimony suggesting cognitive decline, even minor decline, and if he can show you're living alone without support, a judge might grant temporary guardianship pending further evaluation." Temporary guardianship means what exactly? It means David would have legal authority to make decisions on your behalf. Where you live, what medical care you receive, access to your finances. It's supposed to be protective, but it's often abused. And once temporary guardianship is in place, getting it reversed is extremely difficult. The system is designed to err on the side of protection, which means the alleged incapacitated person loses their rights first and has to fight to get them back. I felt my jaw tighten. So David could lock me in a nursing home based on lies, and I'd have to prove I'm competent to get out. Essentially, yes, that's why we need to be proactive. I want you to undergo a full cognitive evaluation with an independent neurologist. Not Dr. Patterson, someone who has no connection to David. We'll document your mental acuity now, before David files anything. That way, if he tries to claim you're incompetent, we have recent medical evidence proving otherwise. "Set it up," I said. 3 days later, I sat in the office of Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a neurologist specializing in cognitive assessment. For 2 hours, she put me through tests: memory recall, problem solving, pattern recognition, abstract reasoning, motor skills, attention span. She was thorough and professional, showing no emotion as I worked through each task. When we finished, she reviewed her notes carefully. "Mr. Brennan, your cognitive function is excellent. You scored in the 92nd percentile for your age group on memory tests. Your executive function, reasoning ability, and processing speed are all well above average. You show no signs of dementia, cognitive impairment, or any condition that would affect your ability to make decisions or live independently. Can you document that in a formal report?" "I already am. I'll have a comprehensive evaluation ready by tomorrow. Your attorney will receive a copy." I thanked her and left feeling vindicated but not relieved. David would argue the tests were biased, that I'd manipulated them somehow, that one evaluation wasn't enough. He'd find a doctor who would say what he wanted to hear. This was going to be a war of experts, and I needed to be ready for every attack. That evening, Frank Mendez called. "Tommy, I've been doing some digging into your son's finances. You said he works in pharmaceutical sales, right?" "That's right. He's done well. Makes around $80,000 a year." "He makes $80,000, but he spends like he makes twice that. He and Sarah are carrying significant debt. Credit cards maxed out at about $65,000. Car loans totaling $42,000. Their mortgage is underwater. They owe more than the townhouse is worth. My stomach dropped. How bad is it? Bad enough that they're facing financial crisis. I pulled their credit report legally, through channels I still have access to. They've missed payments. They're getting collection notices. Tommy, your son is desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. The house, I said quietly. They need my house. If they can get guardianship, they can sell it and solve all their problems. $850,000 would certainly help. Even after paying off their debts, they'd clear over $700,000. That's their retirement fund, their kids' college fund, their way out of the hole they've dug. So this isn't just greed, it's survival. Which makes them more dangerous, Frank said. People protecting their survival will go further than people motivated by simple greed. They'll lie more convincingly. They'll take bigger risks. They'll justify any action as necessary. After hanging up, I sat in my darkened living room thinking about my son. I'd given him $30,000 for his house down payment. I'd paid for his college education. I'd helped him when his car broke down, when he needed a security deposit for his first apartment, when he wanted to take Sarah on a nice honeymoon. Over the years, I'd probably given him close to $80,000 in gifts and support. And now he was drowning in debt, looking at his father's house like a life raft, willing to destroy me to save himself. The next week passed in tense silence. David didn't call, didn't visit. I knew he was planning something, gathering his own evidence, preparing his attack. I spent the time strengthening my defenses. Margaret filed paperwork making my competency evaluation part of my permanent medical record. I met with my financial advisor and documented every account, every asset, every decision I'd made. I wanted a paper trail proving I was actively managing my affairs with full mental capacity. I also started keeping a daily journal, documenting my activities, my thoughts, my interactions. If David claimed I was confused or declining, I'd have contemporaneous evidence proving otherwise. Every entry was dated, detailed, showing clear reasoning and memory. On day 9 of silence, the doorbell rang at 11 in the morning. I checked the camera feed on my phone. A man in a suit stood on my porch holding a folder. Process server. My hands remained steady as I opened the door. Thomas Brennan? That's me. You've been served. He handed me the folder and left quickly, probably eager to escape the uncomfortable task of serving legal papers to an elderly man. I opened the folder standing right there on my porch. Petition for appointment of guardian, filed by David Brennan, hearing scheduled in 12 days. I read through the document, my police training keeping my emotions in check even as rage built in my chest. David's petition claimed I was suffering from progressive dementia, that I was unable to maintain my property, that I was a danger to myself, that I had repeatedly forgotten to take critical heart medication, although I'd never been prescribed heart medication in my life, that I'd gotten lost driving to familiar locations, that I'd left the stove on multiple times, creating fire hazards. Every single claim was a lie. Carefully constructed, plausible-sounding lies designed to paint me as incompetent. The petition included an affidavit from Sarah describing incidents of confusion and forgetfulness. It included statements from 2 of their friends who claimed they'd witnessed my decline during visits, although I'd never met these people. It included a letter from David expressing his deep concern and reluctant conclusion that his father needed protective guardianship for his own safety. What it didn't include was any actual medical evidence. Dr. Rodriguez's evaluation hadn't existed when David filed. Dr. Patterson's records showed no cognitive issues. David was relying entirely on witness testimony and his own claims. I called Margaret immediately. I've been served. I expected this. How are you holding up? I'm angry, but I'm focused. What's our strategy? We file a response denying all allegations and submit Dr. Rodriguez's evaluation. We document your financial management, your daily activities, your social functioning. We bring character witnesses who can testify to your mental acuity. And Thomas, we go on offense. We present evidence that David has financial motives for seeking guardianship, that he's been manipulating you and gaslighting you for months, that this petition isn't about protection, but about exploitation. The recordings, I said. Can we use them? Absolutely. You recorded conversations in your own home. That's legal. Those recordings show David and Sarah explicitly discussing their plan to institutionalize you to access your property. That's powerful evidence of bad faith. When do we file our response? I'm drafting it now. We'll file by end of day tomorrow. We'll also request an expedited hearing for a protective order preventing David from taking any action regarding your property or person until the guardianship petition is resolved. We need to make sure he can't move you into a facility before the hearing. Do it. All of it. Over the next 3 days, Margaret worked with the intensity of a prosecutor building a capital case. She compiled everything. Dr. Rodriguez's evaluation showing my cognitive excellence, bank statements proving I was managing finances competently, my daily journal showing clear thought processes and memory, affidavits from neighbors attesting to my independence and capability, Frank's investigation into David's financial desperation, and the recordings, hours of footage showing David and Sarah plotting in my home. She filed a response that didn't just defend me, it attacked. It accused David of elder financial abuse. It detailed his debt and his motive. It requested sanctions for filing a frivolous petition based on false claims. It asked the court to award me attorney's fees and to prohibit David from any further contact with me. This isn't just defense, Margaret told me after filing. This is warfare. We're showing the judge that you're not just competent. You're actively protecting yourself from exploitation. That's the opposite of someone who needs a guardian. The protective order hearing was scheduled for 3 days before the main guardianship hearing. I sat in the courtroom with Margaret, watching David and his attorney, a slick-looking man named Robert Chen, take their seats across the aisle. David looked confident, almost smug. He glanced at me once, his expression a mixture of pity and determination. He still thought he was going to win. Judge Patricia Williams presided, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. She'd reviewed all the filings before the hearing. Now she looked between the parties with an expression that suggested she'd seen this pattern before. "Mr. Chen," she said, "your client filed a petition alleging severe cognitive decline. But I've reviewed the medical evidence submitted by Mr. Thomas Brennan, and it directly contradicts those allegations. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Chen stood smoothly. "Your Honor, we believe Mr. Brennan's evaluation was conducted under optimal conditions and doesn't reflect his day-to-day functioning. Our witnesses will testify to numerous incidents of confusion, memory loss, and poor judgment that suggest his condition fluctuates and that he may have good days and bad days." "Witnesses who are friends of your client and have never been formally introduced to Mr. Brennan," Chen faltered slightly. "They observed him during social occasions, Your Honor. Occasions that aren't documented anywhere except in affidavits prepared for this proceeding. Ms. Holloway, your position?" Margaret stood. "Your Honor, this petition is a sham. It's not about protecting Mr. Brennan. It's about accessing his property. We have evidence that Mr. David Brennan has been engaged in a months-long campaign of psychological manipulation designed to make his father appear incompetent when he's actually functioning at a very high level. We also have evidence that David Brennan is in severe financial distress and views his father's estate as the solution to his problems." "That's outrageous," Chen objected. "My client is motivated solely by concern for his father's welfare." "Then perhaps your client can explain the recordings," Margaret said, where he and his wife explicitly discuss institutionalizing Mr. Brennan to gain access to his house. Judge Williams leaned forward. "There are recordings?" "Yes, Your Honor, made legally in Mr. Brennan's own home. We've submitted transcripts and are prepared to play them for the court." The judge looked at Chen. "Were you aware of these recordings?" "No, Your Honor. This is the first we're hearing of them." "Ms. Holloway, approach with the transcripts." Margaret handed copies to the judge and to Chen. I watched Chen's face as he read, saw the color drain from his features. David leaned over, trying to read over his attorney's shoulder. When he saw the words, his expression changed from confident to panicked. Judge Williams read in silence for several minutes. The courtroom was dead quiet except for the rustle of pages. Finally, she looked up. "Mr. Chen, these transcripts appear to show your client and his wife discussing a plan to have Mr. Brennan declared incompetent and placed in a facility specifically to access his property. They discuss timing the petition, manipulating medical evidence, and selling the house. This looks less like concerned family and more like financial predators. Your Honor, we'd need to authenticate these recordings. We'd need to verify they haven't been altered or taken out of context. I'm ordering you to do exactly that, Judge Williams said. But in the meantime, I'm granting the protective order. David Brennan is prohibited from taking any action regarding his father's person or property. He is prohibited from contacting Thomas Brennan directly. Any communication must go through counsel. And I'm moving up the guardianship hearing. We're doing this in 2 days instead of 10. I want this resolved quickly, and I want both parties to bring every piece of evidence they have. Mr. Chen, I strongly suggest you advise your client to reconsider this petition, because if I find that it was filed in bad faith for financial gain, I won't just deny it. I'll refer the matter for criminal investigation. Chen sat down heavily. David was whispering urgently to him, but Chen shook his head, his expression grave. They'd walked into court expecting an easy preliminary hearing. They'd walked into an ambush. As Margaret and I left the courtroom, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not just that I would survive this, but that David would face real consequences for what he'd tried to do. That evening, I reviewed more footage from the hidden cameras. In the days before the hearing, David and Sarah had visited my house twice while I was out, letting themselves in with a key I didn't know they had. They'd searched every room, looking for documents, looking for ammunition. The cameras had captured every moment. On the second visit, their conversation had been revealing. "This is taking too long," Sarah had said, frustrated. "What if he's hidden everything? What if we can't prove he's incompetent?" "We don't have to prove it completely," David had replied. "We just have to create enough doubt. The judge will order an evaluation. That takes weeks. During that time, we can get temporary guardianship. Once we have that, we move him to Highland Manor and list the house. Even if he fights it later, we'll have already liquidated the asset." "What if your dad fights back? What if he lawyers up?" "He's 65 and alone. He won't fight. He'll be confused and compliant. That's how old people are when you push them hard enough. They fold." I'd listened to that exchange a dozen times now. They fold. That's what David thought, that I would fold. That age meant weakness, that being alone meant being helpless. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The next day, Frank called with more information. "Tommy, I've been tracking David's movements. Yesterday morning, he met with someone at a coffee shop downtown. I took photos. The man he met with is named Gerald Marsh. He's a professional guardian." "A professional guardian? What's that?" "It's someone the court appoints when a family member can't serve as guardian, usually because of conflict or distance. But there's a dark side to that industry. Some professional guardians essentially run rackets. They get appointed to manage elderly people's estates, then drain the assets through fees and unnecessary expenses. If David is talking to Gerald Marsh, he might be planning to withdraw his own petition and have Marsh appointed instead. That way, David doesn't look like the bad guy, but Marsh does the dirty work and they split the proceeds." "That's legal?" "Unfortunately, in some cases, yes. If no family member is willing or able to serve, the court appoints a professional. And once appointed, that guardian has enormous power. They can sell property, move the ward to facilities, make all financial decisions. It's supposed to be supervised, but oversight is often minimal." "Can we prove David is coordinating with Marsh?" "Not yet, but I'm watching. If they meet again, I'll have more evidence." I thanked Frank and sat back, processing this new threat. David was adaptable. When his direct approach failed, he'd try an indirect one. Use a proxy. Let someone else be the villain while he played the concerned son who'd reluctantly agreed to professional oversight. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated me. He'd thought police training stopped mattering at retirement. He'd thought age diminished capability. He'd thought his father would be passive and confused. I'd spent 28 years investigating criminals. I knew how to think like them, anticipate their moves, stay 3 steps ahead. David was playing checkers. I was playing chess. The guardianship hearing was scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m. I arrived at the courthouse with Margaret 90 minutes early. We'd prepared meticulously. Evidence binders organized by topic, witness lists, medical records, financial documents, the recordings queued up and ready to play. We had built a case that would destroy David's petition and potentially end with criminal charges against him. At 9:30, Chen approached Margaret in the hallway outside the courtroom. He looked defeated. "We'd like to discuss withdrawal," he said quietly. "Withdrawal of the petition?" "Yes. My client has reconsidered. He believes perhaps he was overly concerned and that his father is managing adequately. He's willing to withdraw the petition without prejudice." "Without prejudice means he could refile later," Margaret said sharply. "That's not acceptable. The withdrawal needs to be with prejudice, meaning this matter is closed permanently, and we're still pursuing sanctions and attorney's fees." "That's excessive." My client made a mistake in judgment. He was trying to help his father. "Your client committed elder abuse," I said, speaking for the first time. I'd stayed quiet until now, letting Margaret handle the legal strategy. But this was personal, and David needed to hear it from me. He lied. He manipulated. He tried to steal my home and my freedom. Withdrawal doesn't undo that damage. It doesn't erase the recordings of him planning to institutionalize me for money. It doesn't change the fact that he broke into my house searching for documents. You can withdraw the petition, but the consequences are still coming. Chen looked at me with surprise, as if he'd expected the quiet, confused old man David had described. Instead, he saw someone sharp, angry, and ready for battle. "We'll file withdrawal this morning," Chen said, "but we'll contest the sanctions motion." "Contest all you want," Margaret replied. "We'll see you in court." An hour later, David's petition was officially withdrawn. Judge Williams accepted the withdrawal but scheduled a hearing on sanctions for the following week. As we left the courthouse, I saw David standing by his car, staring at me across the parking lot. He looked lost, defeated, but also angry. This wasn't over for him. He'd lost this battle, but he was already planning the next move. I was ready for it. Whatever he tried next, I'd be ready. So far, Thomas used his police training to expose his son David's guardianship scheme. After installing hidden cameras and documenting months of gaslighting, Thomas presented evidence showing David planned to institutionalize him to steal his $850,000 house. The judge granted a protective order, and David withdrew his petition, but sanctions are pending and David is desperate. Now, the final confrontation is about to unfold. The week between David's withdrawal and the sanctions hearing was the quietest I'd experienced in months. No unexpected visits, no manipulative phone calls, no midnight break-ins. The protective order was working. David legally couldn't contact me, couldn't come to my house, couldn't make any moves regarding my property or person. But the silence felt dangerous. In my years as a police officer, I'd learned that silence from a suspect didn't mean surrender. It usually meant planning. David had withdrawn his petition, but he hadn't given up. Men in desperate financial situations with no legal options often chose illegal ones. Frank confirmed my suspicions 3 days after the withdrawal. "Tommy, David met with Gerald Marsh again, this time at a bar late at night. They talked for over an hour. I couldn't get audio, but the body language was intense. Marsh kept shaking his head. David kept gesturing aggressively. Whatever David wanted, Marsh wasn't agreeing to it." "What do you think David was proposing?" "My guess? Something outside the legal system. Maybe trying to convince Marsh to claim you approached him for guardianship services. Maybe trying to create a paper trail showing you're actually incompetent despite the evaluation. Marsh runs a questionable operation, but he's not stupid enough to commit obvious fraud." He walked away from that meeting looking worried. "Stay on them both," I said. "If David's getting desperate, he'll make mistakes." The sanctions hearing was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. Margaret and I arrived prepared with documentation of all the costs I'd incurred, defending against David's false petition. Dr. Rodriguez's evaluation alone had cost $3,000. Margaret's legal fees were approaching $12,000. Frank's investigation had cost another $4,000. We were asking the court to order David to reimburse me for all of it, plus additional sanctions for filing a frivolous and bad faith petition. Judge Williams took the bench. With the same sharp expression she'd worn at the protective order hearing, she'd clearly reviewed all the materials. David sat with Chen at the defense table, but his posture had changed. No more confidence, no more smugness. He looked cornered. "Mr. Chen," the judge began, "I've read your opposition to the sanctions motion. You argue that your client acted in good faith based on his genuine concerns about his father's welfare. But I've now had time to review the evidence submitted by Mr. Brennan, including the recordings made in his home. I've read the transcripts where your client explicitly discusses institutionalizing his father to access property. I've seen the evidence of your client's financial desperation. I've reviewed the false medical claims made in the petition. This wasn't good faith. This was exploitation. Chen stood slowly. Your Honor, my client deeply regrets how this situation unfolded. He was under extreme stress due to financial difficulties and made poor decisions. He's willing to accept some financial responsibility. Some responsibility? Mr. Chen, your client tried to steal his father's freedom and home. The recordings show premeditation. The financial evidence shows motive. The medical records show the petition was based on complete fabrications. This isn't poor decision-making. This is elder abuse. And frankly, I'm considering whether to refer this matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. I watched David's face go white. Criminal prosecution. That meant potential felony charges. That meant prison time if convicted. Chen looked equally shaken. Your Honor, Chen said quickly, if the court is considering criminal referral, perhaps we could discuss a settlement that includes Mr. David Brennan accepting full financial responsibility and agreeing to permanent restrictions. What kind of restrictions? A permanent no-contact order, formal written acknowledgement that Mr. Thomas Brennan is fully competent, agreement never to file any future guardianship or conservatorship petition, and full reimbursement of all costs incurred, including a penalty amount to reflect the seriousness of the conduct. Judge Williams looked at Margaret. Miss Holloway? Margaret stood. Your Honor, my client would consider such a settlement, but it would need to include more than financial penalties. We'd want David Brennan to sign an affidavit admitting to the false statements in his petition. We'd want him to acknowledge his financial motive. We'd want a formal apology placed in the court record, and we'd want the no-contact order to be permanent and enforceable with contempt sanctions if violated. That's reasonable, the judge said. She looked at David directly. Mr. Brennan, do you understand what's being discussed? Your attorney can negotiate the financial terms, but you'll be admitting to everything. You'll be stating under oath that you lied in your petition, that you manipulated your father, that you tried to institutionalize him for financial gain. That admission will be public record, and if you ever violate the no-contact order, you'll face immediate arrest. Are you willing to accept those terms? David looked at Chen, who nodded grimly. Yes, Your Honor, David said, his voice barely audible. Then we'll work out the details. But let me be clear, Mr. Brennan. The only reason I'm not referring this to the DA right now is because your father is willing to accept this resolution. If you ever try anything like this again, if you ever approach your father, if you ever violate any term of this agreement, criminal charges will follow immediately. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Good. We're in recess for 2 hours while counsel works out the settlement terms. Margaret and I stepped into a conference room with Chen. The negotiation was swift. David would pay $24,000 in reimbursement for all costs. He would pay an additional $25,000 in punitive damages. He would sign an affidavit admitting to every false claim. He would accept a permanent no-contact order, and he would formally acknowledge in writing that I was fully competent and that his petition had been motivated by his financial problems, not my needs. $49,000. It wouldn't undo the emotional damage, but it would compensate me for the nightmare he'd put me through. More importantly, the public admission would protect me forever. If David ever tried anything again, this record would destroy him. We reconvened in court. The settlement was read into the record. David signed the affidavit standing at the defense table, his hand shaking slightly. The judge questioned him directly to ensure he understood what he was signing. Then she approved the settlement and made the no-contact order permanent. Mr. Brennan, Judge Williams said to David before dismissing us, you tried to destroy your father to solve your financial problems. That speaks to character. I hope you learn from this. I hope you understand that elder abuse is not just immoral, but criminal. Your father showed you mercy today by accepting this settlement. Don't mistake mercy for weakness. As we left the courtroom, I felt something shift inside me. Not quite closure, but close. David was legally barred from my life. He'd admitted his crimes publicly. He'd face serious financial consequences that would make his debt problems even worse. There was justice in that, even if it was civil rather than criminal justice. But Frank's call that evening reminded me the danger wasn't entirely over. Tommy, David, and Sarah left the courthouse and drove straight to Gerald Marsh's office. They were inside for 90 minutes. When they came out, Marsh walked them to their car. They had an argument in the parking lot. Marsh was pointing his finger at David, looking angry. David was pleading. Finally, Marsh got in his own car and drove away. David and Sarah sat in their car for another 20 minutes before leaving. What do you think happened? I think David asked Marsh for help one more time. Maybe asked him to file a guardianship petition as a third party. Maybe asked him to create some kind of incident that would make you look incompetent. Whatever he asked, Marsh refused, and now David's out of options. People with no options do unpredictable things. That's what worries me. Keep your doors locked, keep your security system on, and Tommy, keep your weapon close. I took Frank's advice seriously. That night, I double-checked every lock. I set the alarm. I kept my service weapon in the nightstand with a full magazine. I'd stopped David legally, but desperate men didn't always respect legal boundaries. At 2:15 in the morning, my security alarm started screaming. I was awake instantly, weapon in hand, moving to the security panel to check which sensor had triggered. Back door. Someone was trying to get in through my back door. I called 911 immediately. This is Thomas Brennan, retired police chief at 412 Oak Street. Someone is attempting to break into my home. I'm armed. Send units immediately. Units are responding, Chief Brennan. Stay on the line. I moved to my bedroom window where I could see the backyard. A figure was at the back door, working at the lock. The motion sensor lights had come on, illuminating him clearly. David. It was David, violating the protective order less than 6 hours after it had been made permanent. I watched him struggle with the lock for another 30 seconds before he gave up and moved to a window. He was trying to pry it open. He was breaking into my house, and I had no idea what he intended to do once he got inside. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. David heard them too. He looked up, panicked, then started to run. But he'd made a critical mistake. My security cameras had captured everything: his face, his actions, his violation of the protective order. Even if he escaped tonight, the evidence would destroy him. 2 patrol cars pulled into my driveway, lights flashing. Officers jumped out, flashlights sweeping the yard. I went to the front door and identified myself. Retired Chief Brennan. The suspect fled through the back. He's on foot heading east. White male, late 30s, wearing dark clothing. The officers immediately relayed the information. More units arrived. Within 10 minutes, they'd set up a perimeter. David couldn't have gotten far on foot in an unfamiliar neighborhood at night. They found him 20 minutes later, hiding in a neighbor's garage 3 blocks away. They brought him back in handcuffs. He was sweating, terrified, and when he saw me standing on my porch watching, he started yelling, "Dad, please. I just wanted to talk to you. I wasn't going to hurt you. I just needed you to understand." "Understand what?" I said calmly. "That you're willing to violate a court order? That you're willing to break into my house at 2 in the morning? That you're so desperate you'd risk arrest?" "I'm losing everything. Don't you get it? Everything. The house, the cars, our credit, our future. I needed your help." "You needed my money," I corrected. "You never needed my help. You needed my house. You needed my assets. You needed me out of the way so you could take what I'd spent a lifetime building." An officer approached. "Chief Brennan, do you want to press charges?" I looked at David, standing there in handcuffs, his life falling apart, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger anymore, not even satisfaction, just sadness. Sadness that it had come to this, that my own son had become so lost that he'd tried to steal from his father, lie to courts, break into homes. "Yes," I said, "I want to press charges, breaking and entering, violation of a protective order, criminal trespass, all of it." David's face crumpled. "Dad, please. I'm your son." "You were my son," I said quietly, "but you became something else. You became someone who saw his father as an obstacle instead of a person, someone who valued property more than family, someone willing to destroy another human being to solve his own problems. I don't know that person. I don't want to know that person." They took David away. I gave my statement to the officers. I provided the security footage showing the attempted break-in. I signed the complaint, and then I stood on my porch as the sun came up, watching my quiet street wake up, feeling exhausted, but strangely at peace. The criminal case moved quickly. David was charged with multiple felonies. His attorney tried to negotiate, but the evidence was overwhelming. The security footage showed clear intent. The protective order violation was indisputable. The context of the guardianship case showed motive and pattern. David pleaded guilty to reduced charges 3 weeks later. Criminal trespass in violation of a protective order, both misdemeanors. He received 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and was ordered to have no contact with me for a minimum of 5 years, extendable indefinitely. He was also required to attend financial counseling and therapy addressing exploitation behaviors. It wasn't prison, but it was accountability. His criminal record would follow him. His reputation was destroyed. His debt was still crushing him, now with the added burden of the $49,000 he owed me. Sarah filed for divorce 6 weeks after David's guilty plea. She'd finally seen who she'd married, and she wanted out. The divorce would split their minimal assets and massive debts. David would be financially destroyed for years, possibly decades. There was no satisfaction in watching my son's life implode. But there was validation in knowing I'd stood up for myself, that I'd refused to be a victim, that I'd used every tool available to protect my rights and my property. Margaret called one afternoon with final news. Thomas, David made his first payment toward the $49,000. It's a court-ordered payment plan, $500 a month. At that rate, it'll take him over 8 years to pay it off, but the court will enforce it. If he misses payments, his probation can be revoked. Good, I said. Not because I need the money. Because he needs to face consequences every single month for years. He needs to remember what he tried to do. How are you doing? Margaret asked. Emotionally, I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I've started volunteering at a legal aid clinic that helps seniors with estate planning. I want to make sure other people don't go through what I went through. I want them to know their rights, how to protect themselves, how to recognize the warning signs of exploitation. That's wonderful, Thomas. You took a terrible situation and you're using it to help others. It's what Catherine would have done, I said. She always believed in turning pain into purpose. In the months that followed, I rebuilt my life on my own terms. I reinforced my security systems. I updated my estate plan to make it absolutely bulletproof, with multiple safeguards against any future challenges. I documented everything about my daily life, maintaining the journal I'd started during the investigation. But more than that, I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with after Catherine died. I joined a hiking group for seniors. I took a class on woodworking and started building furniture in my garage workshop. I traveled to places Catherine and I had always talked about visiting. I lived. The house remained mine, protected in the trust, safe from any future schemes. Every room still held memories of Catherine, but now they brought comfort instead of pain. I was creating new memories too. Memories of surviving, of fighting back, of winning. I'm 66 now, a year older than when this nightmare started. I live alone in my house, the house I fought to keep, the house that represents everything I built with Catherine. People might look at me and see an elderly man living by himself. They might assume I'm vulnerable, an easy target, someone who could be manipulated or controlled. They'd be wrong. I learned something important through this experience. Age doesn't mean weakness. Being alone doesn't mean being helpless. And 30 years of police training doesn't expire just because you retire. The skills I learned investigating crimes, building cases, reading people, anticipating moves, they're all still there. Sharper than ever, actually, because now I have the wisdom to use them effectively. If you're in a similar situation, if someone in your family is trying to exploit you, trying to take your property, trying to have you declared incompetent, here's what I learned. First, document everything. Every conversation, every incident, every claim they make about you. Keep a journal, keep records, build your own case file. The truth matters, but only if you can prove it. Second, don't assume family loyalty means protection. The people most likely to exploit elderly individuals are their own family members. Children who see inheritance as something they're entitled to now, rather than something they'll receive later. Relatives who view your assets as solutions to their problems. Trust is earned, not given automatically because of blood relation. Third, protect your assets legally before problems start. Put your property in trusts, create clear estate plans, establish powers of attorney while you're undeniably competent. Make it legally difficult for someone to take control of your affairs without your explicit consent. Fourth, get professional help immediately if you suspect exploitation. Don't try to handle it alone. Hire an attorney. Hire a private investigator if needed. Get medical evaluations documenting your competency. Build a team of professionals who can help you fight back. Fifth, use technology. Security cameras, recording devices, digital documentation. These tools are legal, accessible, and incredibly powerful for proving what's really happening. My hidden cameras saved me. They provided evidence that couldn't be disputed or explained away. Sixth, understand guardianship laws in your state. Know what someone would need to prove to have you declared incompetent. Know your rights in those proceedings. Know how to fight back if someone files against you. Knowledge is power, especially legal knowledge, and most importantly, don't fold. Don't accept being pushed around just because someone says you're too old to understand or too confused to manage your own life. You know your own mind. You know your own capabilities. Stand up for yourself. Fight back. You're never too old to defend your rights. David thought I would fold. He thought age meant I'd be passive, confused, easily manipulated. He thought retired meant powerless. He was wrong on every count, and his assumption that I'd be an easy target was his downfall. I'm not a victim. I never was. I was a target, yes, but there's a difference. A victim is someone who's been successfully exploited. A target is just someone who fought back before the exploitation could succeed. Every morning I wake up in my house. My house. The one I bought with Catherine 37 years ago. The one I renovated with my own hands. The one I filled with memories and love and life. Nobody took it from me. Nobody ever will. I pour my coffee in my kitchen. I work in my garden. I build furniture in my workshop. I live my life on my terms. And every single day, I'm grateful that I had the strength and knowledge to fight back when my own family tried to destroy me. The relationship with David is over. That's painful. I grieve the son I thought I had, the man I hoped he'd become. But I don't regret my actions. I protected myself. I demanded accountability. I refused to be a victim. Those choices saved my life, my freedom, and my dignity. Some people might say I was too harsh. That family should forgive. That I should have given David another chance. But those people don't understand what it feels like to have your own child look at you and see only money. To have the person you raised and loved view you as an obstacle to be removed. Forgiveness is possible, maybe, someday. But it has to be earned. And David hasn't even tried to earn it. He's serving his probation, making his payments, but he's never once apologized for what he actually did. Never once acknowledged the betrayal beyond what the court forced him to admit. Maybe that's for the best. Maybe the clean break is healthier than trying to rebuild something that was fundamentally broken. I'm Thomas Brennan. I'm 66 years old. I'm a retired police chief. I'm a widower. I'm a survivor of elder abuse. And I'm living proof that you're never too old to fight back, never too alone to demand justice, and never too vulnerable to protect yourself. Police training taught me how to investigate crimes. Life taught me how to survive them. Age has taught me that survival isn't enough. You have to thrive. You have to refuse to let exploitation define you. You have to stand up and show the world that wisdom, experience, and determination are more powerful than manipulation. My house stands as my victory. Every room is a reminder that I fought and won, that I protected what mattered, that I refused to fold. And every day I wake up here, in this home I love, is another day I prove that age is not weakness, that solitude is not helplessness, and that the man David tried to destroy is stronger than he ever imagined. I'm still here, still sharp, still fighting, still winning, and I'll be here until I decide otherwise. Not when someone tries to force me out. Not when greed disguises itself as concern. Not when manipulation pretends to be love. I'll be here on my terms. for as long as I choose, living free, living strong, and living proof that you're never too old to defend your life. Did you like this story? Stories like this remind us that age brings wisdom, that experience is power, and that standing up for yourself is possible at any stage of life. Where are you listening from? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means everything.